So today I wanted to talk about what I like to call Uber's long con game. Um, if you've been doing Uber for as long as I've been doing it, you have seen a lot of changes throughout its inception. Okay. Back in the day, drivers made pretty good money. They made pretty good money. We were out there 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day hustling, getting surges, multipliers, all kinds of incentives. And we were getting paid good money. Now, I understand that a lot of the money that we were being paid was, venture capital money and things like that. And they needed to basically build a large pool of drivers so that they could then gain a large pool of passengers. So I understand that that's what their game plan was. They did this by pretty much undercutting the private black car service, undercutting taxis. I think at one point Uber was famous for saying they were cheaper than a taxi, famous and faster. So, and they did all this, and they did it in many cities. I don't want to use the word illegally, but they did it while ignoring the for-hire transportation laws in some cases. So over the years, Uber has gotten a reputation of being manipulative. They have gotten a reputation for not always following the rules. And they have gotten a reputation for mistreating drivers as well as passengers. All right, so the first thing we're going to look at and we're going to talk about are Uber's take rates and how they have jumped from the year 2016. They were at 16%. And this is before they take money out for insurance and government fees and things of that nature. So 16% is what they were claiming that they kept for their, profit and running their business and so forth. And then, like I said, 2016, it was 16%. So jump forward to 2025, and that take rate is now 30.5%, 30.4%. Now, again, before we go any further, you have to remember that 30% is before the money that they take out for insurance, for government taxes, other regulatory fees, and things of that nature. So when we look at it and you see that 30, I feel like you could probably close to double that, maybe add another 20 to 30%, depending on what market you're in and whatever, the time of day with Uber. That second part of that fee that comes out is, it's like a ping pong. It's like a ping pong ball. It's all over the place. So when we look at that, try to remember that 30% is just the beginning. They're also taking out an additional probably 20 to maybe 25, 30% that is covering the insurance, regulatory fees, taxes, and things of that nature. So if we just look at that and we say, okay, they're taking out 30 plus 20, we'll go low. 30 plus 20 is 50%. That doesn't leave a lot for the driver, who then is responsible for their vehicle, their car payment, or their lease payment if they're renting from somewhere like DriveWhip or Hertz or part of Uber's rental program. It doesn't leave a lot of meat on the bone for the actual driver. And I think this has been pretty much, like the title says, the long con. Okay, you had drivers who started doing this back from 2016 to like 2020. Okay, and we were getting decent amounts of money when we did rides. We were keeping a larger portion of the fare. Okay. The issue lies, it's a couple things that fall into place with this. Number one, Uber increased what they're charging passengers, okay, which decreased the percentage of the ride that goes to us, that goes to the drivers, number one. Number two, our costs have continually gone up, which you've seen me mention many times in many different videos. We're not going to dive into that right now. What we are going to dive into is what drivers perceived, and that's a key word, perceived, what drivers perceived to be a 75-25% split back in the day never existed. okay? I've been doing this for a very long time, almost 12 years. As a matter of fact, I have to check my app. It might be 12 years now. I've been doing this a very, very long time. And I don't ever remember seeing anywhere where it said that we received a direct percentage split. Now, I do think we should. Don't get me wrong. I do think we should. But the way we used to be paid as drivers was by a rate card. Okay, we had a base fare, which was oftentimes very low, maybe $1 or $2 base fare. Okay, then on top of that, you had your per minute rate and then your per mile rate. Okay, so slowly over time, those things continuously went down. When I first started doing Uber, the per mile rate, I believe, was 1.2499 cents a mile. All right. I don't remember what the per minute rate was. I think it was somewhere around 24 cents a minute, maybe 18 cents a minute. It was up there. It's dropped. And then those rates started going down. I remember the first drop that I kind of remember, it went from the 1.2499 down to 94 cents a mile. And I thought to myself, holy cow. I remember talking to my neighbor because she was who got me into all this. And I was like, oh my God, they just reduced our per mile rate. We're going to be making a lot less money. But at the time, we were also being compensated with multipliers, bonuses, incentives to drive, different streak bonuses and surges and things like that. So they kind of made up, all that kind of made up for the decrease in miles, okay? And as always, Uber would try and sell this decrease in what we were being paid as a good thing, because now we would have more consistent, we would make money more consistently. I don't know why any drivers ever believed this, but I think a lot of us did. So I think the biggest con that they pulled off, and they pulled it off gracefully and perfectly all across the country, and that was convincing politicians and bureaucrats and political leaders that they were just rideshare, okay? They convinced everybody. People just needed a ride from point A to point B, and somebody who was already on their way was going to be a nice person, stop, pick them up, and take them there, okay? Nobody started doing this out of the kindness of their heart. It was all about the money and nothing else. It is a ridiculous fantasy to think that people went out and invited strangers into their car out of the kindness of their heart, all over the United States and for the world, for that fact. Okay. But Uber pulled it off. They had one heck of an advertising and public relations campaign that basically sold a cab company as something new, and that something, a word that nobody had ever heard before, rideshare, to being something that people were doing basically out of the kindness of their heart, to give somebody a ride going to somewhere they were already going. And keep in mind, they did this after initially starting off as a black car service. Okay, that's what they initially started off was is basically a limo service that you could order on the fly, okay, on your cell phone with all your credit card information already loaded into that. So it was a time saver. But somehow when they needed to pivot, they were able to do that and convinced, places like the Public Service Commission and different bureaucrats within cities and states that no, that's not what was going on. This isn't a taxi service. This isn't a limo service. This is rideshare. This is something totally different, and it really shouldn't have the same laws applied to it. And lawmakers fell for it. Another thing I wanted to talk about today was the earnings con. And this basically involved how Uber advertised what drivers were making and what they could make. And they pretty much advertised it as making anywhere from $75,000 to $100,000 or close to $100,000 a year. And it got to the point where the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, actually stepped in and said, wait a minute, Uber, let's check your numbers. Come to find out, those numbers were way off. They were more closer to like 50K a year. So Uber was over exaggerating what drivers could possibly make, okay? And they did this in order to build a large pool of drivers because they knew they needed this giant pool of drivers to accommodate all these new passengers that they were attracting to this new quote unquote rideshare industry. In the end, Uber ended up settling for $20 million. That says something. If a company is willing to settle for $20 million, that says something. At least it says it to me. It says to me that they're admitting, yes, we were wrong. We misled people. All right. So another, we'll call it a fib. Another fib that I feel like Uber has, sold a false bill of goods to drivers is the fact that we are our own boss. Okay. Here it is, 2026, and I can assure you we are far from being our own boss. The algorithm is our boss. It tells us who to pick up and when, where, tells us the route to take. If you skip too many pickups or you decline too many pickups, it lowers your acceptance rate in an effort to manipulate you. If you decline rides or cancel rides after you've accepted them, for whatever the reason may be, okay, again, it punishes you with a cancellation rate. And at the end of the day, you do have a boss, plain and simple. You are not your own boss. And here's the key to all this. If you were your own boss, you could turn off Uber, you could turn off Lyft, and you could go and pick passengers up, plain and simple. You wouldn't have to have the TNC permit through Lyft or Uber. You wouldn't have to have your commercial insurance through Lyft or Uber. You would already have that. And there was already an existing industry for that called taxis, okay? Plain and simple. At the end of the day, all of this boils down to one thing. Uber, Lyft, and these different rideshare companies, they're just taxis. That's all they are, okay? Unless you're doing black car, and then you're just a private limo service. Uber and Lyft like to say that we're all independent contractors, but the truth is we're not. We're not independent in any way, shape, or form because you need to be doing Uber and Lyft. As a matter of fact, many jurisdictions, almost all that I know of, have a law that says you have to display an Uber or Lyft decal in order to do it. That tells me that I'm working for Uber or Lyft, plain and simple. All right, so that's going to wrap this video up. Go ahead and drop a comment. Let me know if any of this, if you agree with it, you disagree with it. I'd love to see what people's position on this is.